Most are afraid of unknown depths, skirting shores thinking world flat. And with the island girls in celebration of new religion. Nobody led me or said this way. I sailed alone on makeshift raft with wind as companion. Fate for deliverance, confidence enough to assess new disposition. Seekers of lost paradise may seem fools to those who never sought the other worlds. Welcome to Momentary Zen with Zen Garcia. Visit www.fallenangels.tv. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here at freedomslips.com, and I hope that everybody's had good holidays and that you are preparing yourself in good health and well-being for the coming new year. And I'm just glad that, really everything is still quiet and peaceful, and there's no grand insanity going on as far as world. I know that as far as the prophetic word and the prophecies that a lot of people have written about, and the expectations are that the insanity will increase at some point, and there shall be peace and come sudden destruction. But for the meantime, let's celebrate. Just another peaceful day and another peaceful moment, and give all praise and glory and honor to the Most High for another chance and opportunity to just embrace another day in the world, as far as being part of the existence and being witness to the creation and our ties with it. It's an incredible place to be, an incredible place to be witness to, and I hope that all of you are finding joy in your everyday, and that you're not letting the overwhelming, as far as the struggles and the worries and concerns of world to come upon you in such way that it's menacing your moment and affecting you, and as far as your emotions or the struggles and just trying to make it. I hope everybody is able to find joy in your every waking day. And so I have as guest with me ChrisTyreman of the chronicleproject.org, and we're going to be discussing tonight how one can determine when Sabbath is, because that's one of the questions I've received ever since I've done the shows that we have done, the two previously over the past couple months, in explaining how people can determine Sabbath according to the phases of the moon, and how God's calendar, the ancient Hebrew calendar system, is set up according to the lunation and the cycle and the phases of the moon, and how it all breaks down and perfectly aligns with that. But people are not able to, you know, you are not able to make use of that knowledge so that it can be practical for them in a way that they can follow along. Um, One of the things that I find very useful is to look up a calendar, and you can find these online, a calendar that has the phases of the moon included, as well as the percentages, and that can help one to, make practical use of the knowledge that we have shared. And for those that did not catch the previous shows that we've done together, Chris is a co-author of The Destruction of Sabbath, which I recommend people read if they are interested in this topic and want to know the details of it. He covers many of the different calendar systems and the history, as far as, even where and how the ancient Hebrew calendar system was replaced when it happened, and also how the determination of when Sabbath occurs has been lost to modern humanity, and why it's important. How this is really a critical topic, since it is one of the Ten Commandments, and that we are told to honor the Sabbath and to recognize and acknowledge it, and even for those that do not believe that the Old Testament has any bearing or any relevance for the New Testament Christians, those, the Ten Commandments are still given and recognized as being important, and most people try to follow them. And so, anyways, Chris, let me get you to give out your website information, contact information, as well as where people can go to find your books, and then if you'll talk about any new projects that you might be working on currently, and then we'll go into some of the details of this.
Sure, Zen. Thanks. You can hear my clock going in the background. It's probably picking it up here. Chronicle Project, thechronicleproject.org. If you want to go over to the website, if you're having trouble, as Zen was mentioning, with calculating Sabbath, we actually have the days and the new moons on our site, just a little down the page past the latest newsletter information. And it'll show you which days are the Sabbath based upon the scriptural calculations. If you want to know for yourself, in that same section highlighted in blue, you'll find the Astro Gov Moonwatch British Navy uses, and it will actually show you how much the new moon is visible over what percentage of the Earth every day as it approaches. And the scriptural Sabbath is the one where the whole world can see it, and percentile calculation, that's 7%. If you have a lunar app, you can scroll your lunar app slowly, and it'll show you. And when the crescent hits 7%, if you want an easy way of doing it, that evening, if it hits 7% before that evening, before it sets, that's the night that you start the Sabbath. That's to make it easy. But I'm sure people have more questions about it than that.
Yeah, and we will. But as far as, why don't we start with how the ancient Hebrew calendar system works, and also one of the other questions that people have asked me about is, how do we know that this was the system and the calendar that was put into place according to creation week? So if you would go into that story as well.
Yeah, there's oh boy, there's a lot of background there. If you read in any Bible right now, the creation week, there appears to be absolutely no mention whatsoever of the moon being used for Sabbath. The translation is in such error that, or maybe they did it on purpose, I don't know, that they completely eradicated any reference whatsoever to the moon even showing up. And it's kind of disturbing. Where we come in is we, with a lot of research, discovered that ancient Hebrew is not based upon a phonetic system like English, for example, where you memorize a word, specific sound, and it has a specific meaning. But instead, that the Hebrew language, which has each letter of the language is actually more like Egyptian, where it's a glyph, and it has a full meaning attached to it. We then went back, once we had been able to understand what the meanings were, we went back and restored so far 15 chapters and several books and some other items. But when we restored the first chapter of Genesis, it was strikingly different, and the moon was very, very important. And if you want, you can go to the website, as I mentioned before. And when you get there, go to, it's right at the top, it says SDH Restored Books of Genesis, and go to the very first one and read that chapter, and you'll see very much how it was designed that the appearance of the moon, the evening of the sixth day, was not only the starting of Sabbath and the first Sabbath, and it was the archetype for how Sabbath was to be recognized, but it was also the start of the month. And that also shows that it's not just weekly Sabbaths, but it's also the start of the month, which is also extremely important. It is also a Sabbath. And if you look through the information that's there, it becomes very apparent that a cycle was specifically set down that's to be followed. And it's really brilliant. When we were first into this, I think it was a little confusing to me because there were so many conflicting scriptures on how this worked and that worked, and some massive amounts of disinformation out on the web. And we were trying to understand it ourselves. But when we finally got all of this done, it turned out to be the simplest system. And not only was it simple, but it's the only system that self-adjusts. The solar calendar needs man adjustments in order to make it work. It continuously goes a little out every year, a second, half second, and over centuries, you lose a lot of time and you have to make adjustments for it. The scriptural lunar calendar, it self-adjusts. You never need to do that. Once you got it, you got it. If you want to understand a little about it, on our website, you can pick up a free copy of, as Zen was mentioning, The Destruction of Sabbath. It's there. You don't have to buy it. Just click on it and it'll download for you. And if you have any trouble getting any of that, just send us a letter and we'll get a different version, like if you need a PDF or an ebook or whatever. And there's no charge. Just let us know and we will send it on out to you. Did that answer the question, Zen?
Yeah, but can you go a little bit more in detail as far as, how you were able to determine according to the creation week, when, how the calendar started, and also how you were able to determine what day, as far as the number, because again, for those that don't know, the ancient Hebrew calendar system isn't based upon Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. And if you would explain a little bit about that as well, so that when we go into some of this, some of these foundational basic principles will be kind of out of the way. And I want to elaborate enough so that for those that did not catch our prior shows, they'll be able to understand and make sense of what we're going to be talking about.
Sure. One of the problems that people would have if they were trying to establish how the original calendar worked was one of the things that we found was that the Bible as it is has what happened on what day in the wrong place. In the Bible, when you read it, it's the creation of light is day one. And so because they've hooked, and there was evening and there was morning the first day, they hooked that to the time of the creation of light. The problem is, and everyone knows this, that a Jewish day begins at the evening. It's when your old day is over, then the next day starts. And people say, that's weird. And I say, well, yours starts at midnight. That's even weirder. So as soon as the day ends, the new day starts. So they created light, and then they had light and darkness, which allowed them to start timekeeping. Now, once that was done, then it said, then there was evening and morning of the first day. So in actuality, the creation of light is not day one. The next part, the next things that they did, those are actually day one. So everything's out by one day. Okay? Now, why that's important is because if you look at which day the moon is made in present translation and which day it is in ours, it's on a different day. And it's extremely important because it says that the creator and the originators, that's the name they have for Elohim, they put the moon, they brought the moon and they paired it with the sun. And that doesn't mean that they stuck them together. What it means is they put them in a position so that they would look like they were over top of each other. So the moon was between the earth and the sun, and that's called the dark of the moon or conjunction. And that presently right now is what the Jews are told, that's the moon, which is ludicrous because you can't see it. How can it be new if it's not visible? But anyway, that was done on the very end. They had it completed by the end of day 3.
Now, if you are reading our material, you'll notice that they are awaiting the moon to appear the evening of the 6th. That's 72 hours between the end of day 3 and the evening of day 6 was 72 hours. So we took that and then we went to absolute conjunction when the moon is perfectly between the earth and the sun, calculated from there 72 hours, and it turned out to be that by that time the moon had moved far enough in its orbit around that 7% of the lunar surface was lit, which is very interesting because 7%, seventh day, it's tidy. I don't know if they planned it that way, but it works really, really nicely. And then it said, this is the first Sabbath. It was also the very first day. And a lot of people figured that, see, there was this week that they were building stuff, but they actually started calendation, keeping the calendar on the 7th day. So that 7th day was actually, and this is where people get a little confused by this, they were working for all those days. And then 6th day was over, the 6th day of labor. On that 7th day, that was a new moon. That was the beginning of a month. It would have been the very first month of the year, so the month of Nisan. And you can tell this because Creator tells Adam and Eve that they're supposed to be collecting all of the seeds and the produce from the trees and the items for eating purposes. And so you'll notice that in the month of Nisan, that's when everything's harvested. So the very first day of the very first month of the very first year is the 7th day of creation, the 7th day that they labor, they quit laboring on that day. That's the day the calendar actually started. So again, to make it a little less confusing, you don't look to conjunction when it's between the earth, the dark of the moon. It's 72 hours past that point, or when the moon is 7% lit. That's when you know that the new month has started. And then after that, it's very simple. You have 6 days of labor and a Sabbath, 6 days of labor and a Sabbath. It doesn't mean that you can't have midweek Sabbaths, because there are some special ones, but it means you can't go longer than 6 days without having a Sabbath. Now, did that help a little better?
Yeah, it did. That clarifies it. And I think it's important too to emphasize, because I cover this in my books a couple times, that what science calls the new moon is different from what God and the ancient Hebrew calendar system establishes as new moon. Because
Exactly.
what Chris was talking about, as far as most people believe that new moon is when the moon is completely dark, or what is referenced as the dark moon or conjunction moon, lunar conjunction moon, because it's in that phase when the moon is completely dark that the moon mimics the sun as far as the movement of the sun, and that's why you can't see it, and because
Yeah,
there's
unless there's an eclipse.
right.
And maybe that'll help people. When there's a full lunar eclipse, that's the position. Normally, the moon will pass under the sun, like lower or higher, but every so often you luck out and it passes directly over it in its orbit, and you see a full solar eclipse. That's what we're talking about. That's the dark of the moon phase right there,
Right. And so
because the sun's absolutely behind it.
this variation is very important for people to realize, because if you look, if you go according to what tells you as far as what is new moon, you're going to be off by this 72-hour differential. And that's very
Yeah.
important for the determination of Sabbath, and for following the ancient Hebrew system if you were to choose to do so. And so, also to clarify, what Chris is talking about as far as the ancient Hebrew calendar system and Sabbath has been maintained since the first week of creation. That
Yes.
it's been this same pattern ever since the first creation week. And this is also important to realize as well, because when you understand this and you're able to wrap your mind around this, then you realize that Sabbath has been constant and steady and persistent in the manner that the Most High gave to us, as far as being able to follow it and determine it. And since the very when He established and created creation, the first 7 days, and the Sabbath aligning with the new moon, not the new moon as far as conjunctive moon, but the new moon as far as the waxing crescent 7% moon. And so, in my opinion, that's a very important revelation to be able to understand, because you'll see that it's been up until now, this whole calendar system has been established to help humanity to keep track and to stay in alignment with Sabbath. And, as we were talking about prior and in the previous show, Sabbath is very, very important. And for
Mhm.
people that follow the Gregorian, Julian calendar systems and are not that believe that Sabbath falls on every Sunday or Saturday, or even if Friday,
Friday or
from
Thursday. Yeah.
right, whatever day you choose to follow and honor Sabbath, is wrong, because it's not a once in every 7 day thing. Um,
Yeah.
why don't you talk and explain that too before we
Yeah, I was
get to
just
the
thinking of
first
that
break?
while you were. Sure. Something you have to understand is Zen was mentioning the idea that there's this continuous 7 week cycle, and this is not how the calendar was originally set up. This is a modernization, and what it does is it ends up preventing people from holding the correct number of Sabbaths in a month, because it negates new moon by doing the 7 day cycle. The Hebrew works differently. Here's how it works. You see the 7%, that night is new moon and the start of a month. Then 6 days and a Sabbath, 6 days of Sabbath, 6 days of Sabbath, 6 days of Sabbath. The cycle goes so that you're going to be celebrating on the 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th of the month. Now, there's the trick. The moon takes 29.53 days to make it complete to the next time the 7% is visible. That isn't a 30-day like the Gregorian. And the Gregorian and the scriptural Hebrew calendar do not line up at all. And you'll go insane trying to line them up. But what you do at the end of the month, the 29th, as I mentioned, on the Hebrew calendar, will be a Sabbath. Then one of two things. It will either be immediately the next day, so on the 30th, you will have another one, or you'll have an in-between day as the moon is completing its orbit, and it goes back and forth, and then it will be the next day. So calendar month will either have 29 days, and then the next day will be a new moon, where it'll be 29 days, then an in-between day, which is a normal work day, and then the new moon again. And people have trouble wrapping this around their mind because they're so programmed for
Right.
that 7 day cycle. What they don't understand is that 7 day cycle, and they honestly believe the 7 day cycle has been from day one. And what they don't understand is it's a Roman construct, and the Romans used to have 10 day cycles. So the whole concept that this has been, ad infinitum from the start of the creation week is completely wrong. We have no actual knowledge using the Roman calendar. There was, oh Lord, in history, there was times when the Romans, they didn't even keep track of the winter months because nothing happened during the winter months. So they didn't even count those. So this idea that there's been a constant 7 days is just historically completely inaccurate. And we deal with that in the book. So as I said to people, grab a copy. It's free. You don't have to pay for it, which makes it so much better. It was a bestseller on Amazon. So, if you only read bestsellers, go grab one.
Before we get to the next break, can you talk about the response that you've had from people since making this available? Because I know since the publication of my latest book that a lot of people have been looking into the calendar system and have been wanting to honor Sabbath in the way
Mhm.
that they believe the Most High has wanted us to, as far as keeping up with the Leviticus 23, the feast days,
Yeah.
and the festivals, and what kind of response you've gotten from people?
Mostly, there's been really positive response, which is fantastic. Very, very little negative response. And once in a while, you get somebody and they'll be like, it's not real. Here's my 2 scriptures, which negates your 400 scriptures, so I'm
Right.
right. And I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. You have fun with that. You're responsible for that. I'm not here to be your Moses. The only thing we're here to do is we're here to put back what was changed, and then people can read it and do what they want with it. But the instructions are very, very clear here. What the moon is for, and in fact, I'm actually looking at right now from a website. It says that the moon was put amid the sky of the celestials, independent toward them, so to move between the day and the night, and it's to exist for these things: tides, congregations, measurements, and years. And it's also to be for continued illumination amid the sky of the celestials. So that's the moon. When you read about the sun, the only thing that the sun is for is daylight. And
Mhm.
that, again, is really marred if you read the Bible translation. And people right now are trying to combine the solar, they call it the lunisolar calendar, which after the break, we should get into that to show people, no, you don't do that. Because they want to tie that Egyptian calendar and that Roman calendar, they want to tie that and have that necessary so that the scriptural lunar calendar can't function without them. And I think that's something we should, look over before the break or after the break.
Yeah, we will do that. We're 2 minutes out from break, so
Happy
well,
Hanukkah. It's over.
we're going to talk about that too when we come back. But really quick, give out your website and your contact
Sure.
information again.
Okay. Thechronicleproject.org. And again, thechronicleproject.org. Everything you need there, including if you need to contact us, have our email there, respond to chronicle@gmail.com. And if you have a question, we'll answer. We're not the people that you write something to and they just ignore you. So we'll write back.
All right, we'll be right back, everyone. All right, welcome back, everybody. There's a couple passages that I wanted to share from the Book of Jubilees, which is a very interesting text as well as because it covers in great detail the calendar system and how it works. But I'm only going to share one small portion this time, and then later, maybe after the next coming break, I'll share a more extensive passage. But I think this one's interesting. It says, these are written and ordained as a testimony forever, and Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become hereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month, he was bidden to make for himself an ark. And on that day, the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the fourth month, the months of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the seventh month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. It's interesting to me that, again, on the new moon of these four various months, that
Yeah,
these things occurred. Chris, comment?
very interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting, actually. I was just listening through as you were going because I was thinking we have redone what happened during the time of Noah. And in the Bible, they have it that what is it? The something of the ground opens up and water comes bursting out.
Uh-huh.
And in the restored version, what happened is it says on that specific day, the oceans left their ocean beds and rose up over the earth. And this major tsunami came and wiped everything. It literally says it cleaved everything right off. And if you've ever, can you imagine, the oceans, something happens to cause the water from the oceans to come up over the earth. It's interesting. I read an ancient Jewish text, and I'm blanking where it is right now, where it says that two stars fell from the heaven 6 months apart and landed in the ocean and caused this major tsunami to come up over the planet and wash everything away. And when they impacted, that the water that was thrown up into the air then came down for 40 days as rain. And I thought that's
Yeah,
really
that's
cool
interesting.
because that matches how modern science could explain that tsunami. But I noticed in that text that it said that I'm going to get it wrong. Basically, the earth opened up and it started bringing the water back down into it. And I'm thinking I would love to get a hold of the Hebrew text because I'm guessing what happened, because according to ours, the Elohim, the originators, did something where they pushed down the ocean beds so that the water would pull off of it and back down into the ocean. They literally went over and pulled the water back off the land. So absolutely fascinating stuff, but very interesting that it happened on the first of each month. I
Right,
think that's
right,
really, and it shows you the importance to Creator of those months. I
right.
mean, the day that it began, everything began for the calendar was a new moon on that seventh day, and then the starting or the end of it all starts on a new moon. He gets the instructions that something new is going to begin, build an ark, and each of these things start happens on a new moon, which should tell people when it happens more than just once, it's not just chance, but that's an important day for calculation.
Right. And I will, I took this small portion out of one of my most favorite quotes for Jubilee 6. And when I elaborate on it, I'll read it a little bit later towards the end of maybe this segment because it's so very interesting and it'll help also with the discussion that we're having. It also shows, how the Most High had prophesied that these things would be changed. But let's talk about that. Can you talk about your study as far as the calendar systems? Talk about because even the pagan calendars, if I'm correct, were
Yeah.
based on the lunar cycle initially.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the old calendar systems were based on the movement of the moon, and it wasn't until later, much later, that these things were changed. And so,
Mhm.
can you talk about that history? Mention some of these calendar systems and what happened that took us off of these off of the lunar calendar and
That's
hid
that's the
those
really
things
good.
for us.
Yeah, that's the really good question there. And you know what? I haven't found the answer to that. And the question is, what took us off the lunar systems? They worked. They worked really well. You can go into ancient cultures, and every single one of them started with the lunar system, which and everybody knew it was the perfect self-adjusting system. Uh, and the cool part about the system is you can work it no matter where you are. You don't need a calendar on the wall. You can watch the phases of the moon at night. You know Sabbath's coming because the way that it's set up. As given an example, when I see that the moon is full, I know Sabbaths either the next day or the day after, depending on how it looked when it started. And so the half moon, the quarter moon, they all signal Sabbaths coming up. With a solar calendar, you lose that day. You lose one day, and you're hooped. You have to wait until the next equinox before you know what day it is. But with the lunar calendar, you can tell where you are in any given month by simply looking at it. Looking at it, you can't lose it. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the Egyptians come up with the solar calendar and base everything on the solar calendar. They're really the ones that did the refining of it. And I'm beginning to think they had help. The Egyptian culture comes out of nowhere. Bam, it's fully developed. It has technologies. It has amazing constructs and amazing architecture. Everything, boom, out of nowhere, this place suddenly arises, and this wonderful solar calendar. And I'm beginning to think that the reason we were adjusted out of the lunar calendar is whoever is in charge of what's going on wanted to draw us away from recognizing that our means of keeping track of time is based upon the way Creator wanted it. I think that they wanted to pull the world away from that and set up a system that had nothing to do with them. I think that's what it is. But nowhere is there anything written that says this is why we chose to do this. So sadly, I wish there was.
Well, interesting that it shows on their depictions on their walls that they were dealing with and revered the fallen angels, these hybrid gods, and
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely they were trying to lead us away from the truth of the Most High, and it's one of the reasons why these pagan cultures, worship the fallen angels and were led into all kind of abomination, like
Yeah, which caused
sacrifice
massive
their
problems.
children, things like that.
Hey, can you tell everybody where to find a copy of Jubilees? Because I personally would like to know myself.
Yeah, I'll actually post a link in the chat room for those that want to, follow along or read it. And then after we talk about this, I'll actually read the particular passage that I wanted to get you
Okay.
to comment on it. But yeah, please elaborate further.
Okay. My personal, we're re-going back through because we've made certain corrections, and the further we get in when we restore stuff, the more we're understanding how certain words are and how English should be rather than just. We try to get a synonym as close as possible to the actual Hebrew to help people understand. And so every so often we'll adjust stuff and go back, and we've gone back to, again, the very first couple of chapters of Genesis. And there's a quotation that I just finished the other night going through. I think in the Bible, it's talking about, it's after Adam and Eve have eaten from the fruit, and Creator is talking to the serpent in the Bible, which that's not real, but he says to him, there's this prophecy about he will, sorry, Zen, I'm not going to get this very well. He will bite your heel and you will tread on his head. And it's supposed to be a prophecy about Jesus coming later on. When we ran it properly through, it turns out it doesn't say that at all, but it's talking about one who would come from the woman, and that person would leave the Nakash. Nakash is the serpent's vision for how things should be, and those people which had been tread on, they would leave with him. So it was obviously talking about Moses. And the woman, he said in the future, the woman's seed and your seed will have contention. So it's obviously not talking about Adam and Eve, but the future. But the passage is talking about Moses, and Moses leaving the Nakash's vision for how things should work. Where did Moses leave? Moses left Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm beginning to think that the Nakash and the fallen angels, as you said, that Egypt was their big construct, their great civilization to be able to say to Creator, hey, look, see what we did. We didn't need you. Look how well this works. Except it didn't work. It fell apart.
Well, that was definitely one of them. but you see the reverence of the winged serpent, the feathered
Mhm.
serpent,
Yep.
these kind of hybrid fallen angelic type beings,
Yep.
all over the world. And but yeah, I do believe, especially during that time, Egypt was the greatest empire then, in of the known world during that time.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I can agree with, and it's also why, the Most High led them out of the bondage of Egypt to
Exactly.
show to the rest of the pagan cultures and all the civilizations that revered the fallen angels that he was the Most High God, and
Yeah.
that all these little g gods, um, they have nothing on him, and how he would take this people and took them out of the bondage of Egypt, this great empire, and
Yeah.
how he would use them to destroy, which at the time was another, really feared group, the giants that were
Mhm.
living in the land of Canaan, to destroy them and to wipe out this
Yeah.
hybrid seed line, because they are
Yeah. It's
also seed of the
it's a two
serpent.
for one there. It was just awesome.
Right.
It's interesting actually, because the children of Israel came out on the 14th of Nisan, Nisan being the first month of the Hebrew year. They came out on the 14th of Nisan, and the 14th will always be a full moon because Sabbath is coming up on the 15th. So he made sure that they were coming out on the full moon. But what's very interesting about Egypt at that time period is their two gods in Egypt at that time period were the goat, uh, or ram, and the other one was the pig. And on the full moon nights, they would sacrifice a pig and also or rams and things like that, to their gods because their gods were that image. And what was really interesting is that Creator told all through Moses, all the people of Israel that night, they were to take a goat, a flock animal. Is what it's, in the Bible it says a lamb, but it's not. It's a yearling flock animal. So either a goat or a ram, because these were adult animals, and they were to take their blood and to put them over their doorposts and the window posts. And to a reader just reading it nowadays, we don't get what that was saying. It's very interesting what it was saying. The Jews were saying to the Israelites, were saying to the Egyptians, your gods are dead here. You see their blood? It's on our doorposts, it's on our windows. Your gods are dead. And that night, Creator came in and killed all his firstborn.
Mm-hmm. Very
Two for one.
interesting.
Very
Right.
cool stuff. Again,
Right.
that only comes out, unfortunately, in the restored versions when we put back what we put back. And very interesting stuff. And we could get into that later, but there's a lot of conflict with people trying to understand how Passover works. And sometime when you're bored, let's do a show on that, because when we restored it, we were able to fix all of the problems because proper restoration and there's no more conflicts. Whereas right now, if you read the instructions for Passover, it's all over the place. People are very confused about it.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, absolutely. And well, I think we got like 6 minutes. So what I'm gonna do is I'll save this quote for till we get back, because I want to give you plenty of time to comment on it, without us going to break. But can you, since you mentioned that the 14th was on a full moon, can you
Mhm.
also talk about how the Sabbaths, each one of them, how every month, there's five, and how they align with the phases of the moon? And also, if you would, for those that, um, other than going to your website and trying to determine the percentages, and also, how close
Mhm.
we are to Sabbath, how
Right.
people can do that just by using a regular calendar, that may have the percentages of the moon and their phases, how they
Yeah.
can determine that, and how each of the Sabbath aligns with, these different phases.
An interesting thought, because over the last little while, we've been trying to say, okay, let's pretend we don't have the net. How can we explain it to people so that they understand that which of the crescents they're supposed to be looking at? And presently, there's a group in Israel and also in the U.S. I shouldn't say that they're just in Israel, and they do use the lunar moon and the lunar phases in order to observe Sabbath, which I should say, my congratulations to them, because you can lose your job to try to do this, but we'll get into that. When you look and you're waiting, you want to look to the horizon. Sometimes you can see a crescent moon and it'll be at the horizon just after sunset. And the best way of describing it is if you hold your hand out to arm's length and you put one of your fingers out, and it can cover when the moon just appears, and you can cover that because it's close to the horizon. That's not the new moon that's visible over the whole Earth. Maybe 50 to 60% of the Earth could see that, but there's 40% of the Earth that won't be able to see it. You want to wait till the next night. So if you have no other way of calculating it, it's really simple. If it's super close to the horizon, that's not the new moon. It's more like 4 fingers from the horizon, number one. Number two, a Hebrew month doesn't go longer than 30 days. So if you saw a new moon the month before, and then you get 30 days, the next day will automatically be a Sabbath. So maybe that would help people if they're looking to calculate it visually. If you don't see the moon because it's cloudy, that's another question people always ask, then that's how you do it. No month is longer than 30 days, and then the next month it corrects back. So it's one of these things where somebody standing on a hillside somewhere can look at and can see, and even a little shepherd boy, 6-year-old, whatever, you can stand and you look and you'll know it's Sabbath. Some people will say, how do you know that it's not that very first crescent? Well, 2 things. First, we can see a crescent here. Sorry, I should say where I am. I'm in the middle of Canada up here in Saskatchewan. And there are times we can see a crescent on the horizon. Israel cannot see that crescent that night. So how weird would it be that we're holding Sabbath over here and Israel isn't? But if you wait till the next night, everyone worldwide can see that same crescent moon. So I think that's a simpler way than saying to them, get a lunar app or whatever. But if they want to go back to what you were saying, you get a lunar app, and when it hits 7%, and before lunar set, that day is a Sabbath. Bing, bam. And after that, then 6 days and a Sabbath. 6 days a Sabbath. And that's all you have to do. There's no catch. There's no difficulty. Don't try to do it on Hebrew calendar, on a Gregorian calendar. You'll go insane. Other than just mark it like if it's Sunday night to Monday, then you just tick off all of the Sunday, Monday nights all the way through the calendar that month. But it gets a little confusing for me when I do that. Did that answer the question, or did I get off somewhere?
Yeah, no, that's good. And let me just reiterate what you were saying, because the first Sabbath is always this 7% crescent, waxing crescent moon, and that's always the first day and the first Sabbath of the lunar month. Then you have 6 working days and another Sabbath, the second Sabbath, which aligns somewhat with the first quarter moon. And
it'll be just when you see the first quarter, when it goes past that, then you know roughly that that's going to be the Sabbath day. But it's never on, because the first one's 7%, so it's going to be 7% past the first quarter, 7% past the half, 7% past the full moon. That's how it works.
Right. So somewhat aligns with the first quarter moon. And then the third Sabbath, which is 6 more working days, and then you have the third Sabbath, which always falls on the 15th, somewhat aligns with the full moon. That's
right.
7%
it'll be just past the full moon. And
yes,
you get used to it after a while. And tell people, don't get crazy. It's a self-adjusting calendar. So if you're off one month, it adjusts back the next month. So if you end up having to do it visually, then it's going to correct itself back. And that's what's wonderful about it, is it will correct itself back. I noticed, sorry, I'm going to skip back here real quick. I noticed Pale Rider had a question about the word Nakash. Should I fill him in quickly on what that means?
Yes, but before you do, let me I'll get you to answer that when we return.
Sure.
But really quick, just let me finish this thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth Sabbath would somewhat align with the third quarter moon, and then the fifth one would somewhat align with conjunction. And
it'd be like a 7% crescent the opposite direction. You know what I mean? Just before.
right.
So you got the first 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th.
Right. And
So
then because the Hebrew month never has more than 30 days, it alternates. One month is 29 days, the other month is 30 days, back and forth, because
sometimes you can get, as crazy as it sounds, sometimes you can get a couple of 29s and a 30 and a 30 and a 29 and 220. So it does go back and forth.
All right, we'll be right back, everyone.
Sounds good. Nice.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Really quick, just want to remind everybody that Revolution Radio has been doing that, running that fundraiser where if we reach our goals as far as the funding needed to pay for the monthly bills for the network, that the donations will be given to um, it was one of the nonprofits that supports veterans. I can't remember right offhand, and also the Women Battered Women's Group and Toys for Tots. So those of you that can, please do go to the network and click on the donate button. Go to freedomslips.com and support the network in that way. And that there is also another fundraising effort going on where um, those of you that donate will be giving a particular pocket knife according to your donation. And that if you wanted to receive the pocket knife in, as far as return and for your donation, that you'll have to include a self-addressed stamped envelope, maybe like a bubble wrap envelope, and include that and send it into the station so that you can receive that gift. Or those of you that donate $75 or more, that there is a 2015, a number of Silver Eagles 2015 brilliant uncirculated gem quality Silver Eagles that are that the station is offering as well in exchange for your support. And we really appreciate those of you that do so, that enable us to come to you in the way that we do and to cover the various topics that we do. There's over 92 hosts coming to you 24/7 on both Studios A and Studio B. And so thank you in advance for continued support, and we appreciate the fellowship that we share with all of you. You are very wise audience, and we consider you all to be friends and family. All right, and so I'm going to read these two passages. The one I wanted to read is really quick from the Targums. It says this about the creation of the sun and the moon, which I thought was very interesting. And then I'm going to read that passage from Jubilees that will set the premise for this portion of the show, and I'll get you to comment after that. But the Targum says this as far as the creation of the sun and the moon. And the Lord said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to distinguish between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for festival times and for the numbering by them the account of days, and for the sanctifying of the beginning of months, and the beginning of years, the passing away of months, and the passing away of years, the revolutions of the sun, the birth of the moon, and the revolvings of seasons. And let them be for signs and for seasons and for the sanctify of the months and the years. That was another portion from the Jerusalem Targum, but basically repeating the same thing. All right, and now I'm going to read that from the book of Jubilees in reference to the changing. This is from chapter 6. Those of you that want to read it for yourself or maybe look a little bit more in depth in it, it says this. For this reason, it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. So, this law that was established by Moses and given to the Israelites was already given to him on these heavenly tablets, that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah. 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up to thy days, and in thy days the children of Israel forgot it until ye celebrated it anew on this mountain. And do thou command the children of Israel to observe this festival in all their generations for a commandment unto them. 1 day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival. For it is the feast of weeks and the feast of first fruits. This feast is twofold and a double nature, according to what is written and engraven concerning it. Celebrate it. For I have written in the book of the first law, in that which I have written for thee, that thou shouldest celebrate it in its season, 1 day in the year. And I explained to thee its sacrifices, that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it throughout their generations in this month, 1 day in every year. Just a little bit more. Hold on. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month he was bidden to make for himself an ark. I read this part. And on that day the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the 4th month the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the 7th month all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were open, and the waters began to descend into them. On the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. On this account, he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever, and thus are they ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks from one to another past their memorial, from the first to the second, and from the second to the third, and from the third to the fourth. And all the days of the commandments will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. This is the 364-day year according to the book of Enoch. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets, and there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And command thou the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days, and they will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall complete. Hold on 1 second. I lost my place.
Don't worry, it's so easy to do.
Yeah. All right. Just a few more sentences here.
Yeah.
For everything will fall complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons, and all the years will be dislodged from their order. And they will
Sabbath.
disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons and the Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it unto thee, and it is not of my own devising, for the book lies written before me, and on the heavenly tablets the division of the days is ordained, lest they forget the feasts of the covenant and walk according to the feasts of the Gentiles, after their error and after their ignorance. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon, how it disturbs the seasons and comes in from year to year, 10 days too soon. For this reason, the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order and make an abominable day the day of testimony, and an
Whoa.
unclean day a feast day. And
Wow.
last part,
Wow.
and they will confound all the days, the holy with the unclean, and the unclean day with the holy. For they will go wrong as to the months and Sabbaths and feasts and jubilees. For this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them. For after thy death thy children would disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only, and for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. And so you see in this particular passage, the Most High is basically telling them
Yeah,
that,
seriously.
yeah, that they will not
That's
only take
amazing.
a day um, and make it the
A
Sabbath,
wrong day.
the right
Wow.
Sunday, that they took
Wow.
Sunday and make it the Sabbath day, but that when they do
Wow.
this and change the calendar, it will throw them off according to all of the festivals, all of the
Yep.
feasts, and the determination of all the Sabbaths. All right,
Yeah.
let me turn it over to you.
Now, people say 364 days, right?
Right, this is the
Okay.
year according to Enoch.
Right. And what people need to understand is that there's an adjuster that occurs to adjust to that solar cycle that occurs using the lunar cycle. Because people always say, well, that's ridiculous. You'll end up being way out after a while, but you won't, because it's self-correcting, which we can get into a little later. But wow, the idea that it states that they would end up choosing a wrong day. And
Right,
that's not just Sunday, but the Jews, like my people right now,
exactly,
they
yes.
do it on Saturday.
Right,
Okay. I mean, the Muslims have the wrong day, and the Muslims follow the lunar, and they have the wrong day. Every single major religion that uses the lunar calendar is on the wrong day for their Sabbath.
right,
That's scary.
right.
That's terrible.
Yeah, and it
That's
throws them off on everything else as far as the
sure.
Levitical feasts and the
Wow. Just
determination, the new
yeah,
moons, all of that.
preaching.
Please continue with your commentary.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just shocked. I never heard that one before. So to me, that was a shock. I knew that Sunday wasn't. Now, maybe we should start at that point and say, because there's going to be people out there who they're going to say, wait a second, I'm a Christian. That's a Jewish thing. Jesus rose on Sunday, and so that's why this is the special day. But if you are following Jesus, then you must follow what he said to do. And he said, whosoever keeps the law and teaches others to do so will be great in the kingdom of God, the coming kingdom when he rules the earth. Excuse me. Whoever does not keep the law and teaches others not to do so will be the least. Now, if the law was going to pass away, Jesus himself said, until the heaven and earth pass away, these laws remain. And he said, if you're not teaching them and keeping them, you will be least in my kingdom. And you can't ignore that. People say, well, the law has passed away. And what I say to them is, show me where Jesus said that was going to happen. And they
Right.
can't, because he never did. And so if you think that this is just a Jewish thing, I have news for you. It's not. Or maybe it is, because Jesus was a Jew, never stopped being a Jew. His followers were Jews. People in Jerusalem at the first church, they were all Jews, and they were keeping the law, and they were keeping Sabbath. And the idea that you're now separated from that, that's a Catholic Church doing. So you have a problem here. Either, yes, the Catholic Church is right, and I should be following what they teach, because the Catholic Church are the ones who set up Sunday.
Right.
Or I should be keeping what the scriptures say. So, if you're a Catholic and you want to keep the Catholic's way of doing it, I don't have a problem with that. That is your choice. But you can't sit there and tell me that Sunday is the right way, when even the Catholics admit they're the ones that came up with Sunday. And people will say, but that's the day Jesus rose from the dead. Impossible. Because the calendar, the lunar calendar, doesn't match up with the Gregorian. So if he was killed on the 14th of Nisan, and he had to have his body taken down off of that tree, why? Because a curse would be upon the whole land if they didn't get his body down before Sabbath. And people say that was Friday. Say, no, that was the 15th of Nisan. It doesn't match up with the Gregorian. And even if it matched up, let's pretend it matched up with the Gregorian that year, even though there's no way that any self-respecting Jew would have kept the Roman calendar, because they were the overlords that they hated. But let's pretend they did. He said 3 days and 3 nights, he specified separately, that he would be in the belly of the earth. That's a term for cave. If you count that, 3 days, 3 nights, that's not Sunday morning, that's Monday. Simple math. Sunday cannot be any kind of Sabbath except for a Catholic Church construct. Now, did I get off point there?
No, that was good. And I think it's also important that when people recognizing that the Sabbaths fall on the 1st, the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th, that you will see these dates repeated in the biblical text. That whenever
Yes.
there's
They're
whenever
on those
something
days.
happens on those days, the Most High always has them stop and to be able to honor Sabbath, everything, even
Right.
with the Exodus, with their being inside celebrating
Yep, on
Passover.
so specific days. Yeah.
Yeah, and then after Passover, then they flee in the Exodus and cross over, the Red Sea, and then the Most High destroys the Egyptian armies. I mean, he always takes into account the Sabbath and has them
Yes.
honor
And
it.
people don't understand that. And I need to stick this in here, because this is one of the things, if you read our newsletter this month, it's very important, because it has a talk about, it appears the way that it's set up, that they would have been in the desert walking on the 15th. And people have written me and said, look at that. See, they're walking on the 15th. So therefore, our Creator does not honor the 15th as a Sabbath. And the Bible translators have changed one specific word. And only there, and only at that time, that's the only time they've ever done it, it's pulled up the pegs of the tents. And they translated it pulled up. And it's the only time they ever did that, to make that verse. So if you're reading through the Bible and you find these verses and they seem to make it look like Sabbath is being ignored, I can guarantee you, from what we have seen, every single time there's a mistranslation right there, and it's pretty darn obvious. And if you use the Strongs, you can even see what they've done. And I personally think it's done on purpose. That's
Yeah, I
just
think a
my
lot of
opinion.
things like that are done purposely, in order to deceive us or lead us astray or to keep
You
us from
betcha.
the truth. It's my opinion that, even with the Nicene Council, that it was more about
Oh yeah,
hiding the truth.
it's
And
absolutely horrible. They wanted to literally separate the Christian church from any Jewish involvement whatsoever, so that they would be absolutely 100% in control. And most of the church at that time was still using the lunar way of observing the new months and everything. In fact, for at least another 70 to 100 years in England, the church was still using the lunar calendar until finally the power of the Catholic Church spread far enough that everybody had to switch over on pain of death or heavy fine if they didn't do it.
Right, and we'll talk about that too, because I think it's important that people understand the history. Um,
Mhm.
but Yeshua said, for those keeping the commandments, he said that if you love me, that you
Yep,
keep my Father's commandments, and
you
so
betcha.
yeah,
Yep.
and that's in John chapter 14. But can you elaborate on how the implementation and the acceptance of the Julian calendar, that it was done under the pain of death and torture, and that people were forced, and that this is the reason why the Jews under Hillel, they conceded to make Sabbath
Yeah.
a particular day of the week, so that people can
Yes.
now understand the history behind this forced implementation.
The wonderful church at that time, the Nicene Council, and believe me, there was great dissension in the choices that were made. It's not like everybody went in the council and said, "Whoa, that's great." You can read the historical documents about how some of the elders and the people who came were so incensed by what they chose, but because of the strength of the vote, they had no choice in this. And once they literally made illegal the Hebrew calendar at the Council of Nicaea. It was made illegal, and anyone who would not accept the Gregorian calendar over the Hebrew, and what was the other one? There was something really, oh yeah, and anyone who wouldn't accept the Trinity, in the next couple of years, this church, this "they shall know us by our love" group of people, who obviously seemed, they're not obviously followers of Jesus, killed over 100,000 people who would not bow to their requests on these topics. And I mean, it was just people, if they knew the actual history of what was going on and this Council of Nicaea, I think they'd be horrified. But the church likes to gloss over and say, "Oh no, this was a wonderful time. They got together, they prayed, they worshiped, and Creator showed them which books were supposed to go together in the Bible." Oh yeah, if only that happened, which it did not. And they rejected a lot of stuff. It was literally political. And again, get a copy of our book on the website, because it goes through all of this, and it goes through in a nice manner where you don't get brain overload. You can put it down if you don't, like if you hit that point, put it down and then come back later. But it goes through the full history. I should give a lot of credit, by the way, to Brad Vornholt, because he's the co-author on this. We should have them together sometime. And he and his
Yeah, that
mom and
would be
sister,
wonderful. I'd be
yeah,
glad to do that.
and his mom and sister, they're incredibly knowledgeable on this. And most of this information, they were actually kicked out. What's the word for kicked out of the church?
Excommunicated.
Excommunicated. They were excommunicated from the Seventh-day Adventists on, like, they really were brought before the main council and excommunicated because they leaked all of this stuff from the files of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And it was really, it's an amazing story, and well worth some time. And I think their website is, I'm going to get this wrong, Four Angels, something like that. Anyway, if you type in Vornholt, they'll probably come up. I know that the stuff's out there, and it's really, it's just an amazing story, and well worth taking the time to hear what they went through.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, I'd love to do that. That would be a fascinating show, most certainly. But for those that have just recently joined us, as far as the chat room, that have come
Mhm.
in and are interested in what we're talking about, give out again where people can go to download your
Sure,
book, the name of
sure.
it, and all that.
Go to thechronicleproject.org, and right on the main page, you'll see a picture of the destruction of Sabbath. Just click on it, and it'll automatically start downloading something to you. If it doesn't work, if it's in a format you can't read, get a hold of us. You'll find our email address down at the bottom of the page there. And we'll send you a different version so that you'll be able to read it whenever you can. Before I forget, Zen, quickly mention, I know Pale Rider is probably listening out there.
Oh,
The
yeah,
word
that's
Nakash
right. Yeah.
we had used earlier. In the first books of Genesis, first couple of chapters, in the Bible, Eve's talking to a snake or a serpent. It's actually, the term is the Nakash. Now, the is very important because it's a title. So she was not talking to a serpent. The Hebrew is to proceed to project. So in other words, to put something out before being there. Now that can be taken as a serpent who like puts his tongue out, before it gets to you. And so that term could be, but in this case, it's the Nakash. And what it is it's the second in command or the overseer of the creation. Okay. And he was the one in charge of everything preceding being projected out onto earth, onto the earth, for example. So in charge of creating the animals that were projected onto the earth, creating the seed that was projected onto the land. So he was the guy who was overseeing underneath Creator. So he, in essence, was second in command. And then he saw a moment whereby getting Adam and Eve to stop listening to the instructions of Creator and instead putting themselves under him, that he would take over control of the earth. So.
All right, we'll be right back, everyone, for final segment. Pale Rider had asked me what the name of the Nakash was in the Targums. For those that don't know what the Targums are, they are the Aramaic translations of the original Hebrew Torah, because it was necessary that that the original Hebrew Torah was translated into Aramaic, because when the people returned back to Israel after their exile in Babylon and abroad, they no longer could speak or understand their native and their father's tongue as far as Hebrew, and they had to assimilate Aramaic because it was the language of that particular area, and it was the language which everybody did their transactions as far as barter and buying and selling of goods, and so the original Hebrew Torah could only be read by the priest, and during when they returned to the land and restored the temple and it was rebuilt, and um, worship services were reinstituted, the rabbis kept having to stop to, after they read the Hebrew Torah, they'd have to stop and then make translation of the Hebrew scriptures into Aramaic. And so the oral translations eventually became written translations, and that's how the Targums came about. But anyways, we now have an English rendition of the original, the Aramaic translations of the original Hebrew Torah, which are interesting and insightful to look into. And my eighth book, I published these, both the Palestine and the Aramaic Targums, together. And so those that are interested, just contact me at zengarcia.com for further information on them. But anyways, the serpent, the Nakash, is described as this. It says, and the woman beheld Samael, which is, for those that don't know, is the angel of death, according to the Gnostic text. The demiurge is given the name of Saklas, Samael, and also Yaldabaoth. But anyways, it says, and the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and was afraid, yet she knew that the tree was good to eat, and rather it was medicine for the enlightenment of the eyes. And so the serpent is actually named Samael in this particular text. Now, and so, Chris, I want you to, in the first
That's
part of this particular last portion of the program, can you
mhm.
talk about the book? You know, the various chapters, the topics. What are the most important messages?
Oh
I know
Lord.
we've talked about some of that over
There
the
is
course of
there
the show, but
is so much. Like I can't. I want to write a book about how much stuff we have found, and I don't even know where to begin because there's so much, and there's so much that I can't even explain to people. So much that was lost that is being rediscovered.
right.
And I'll give you a quick example. Samael, by the way, would mean to begin toward inclination. So they called him the one who caused, and basically Eve, to begin toward inclining to his point of view.
Oh, that's very
So
interesting.
that's not his real name. That's simply how they're describing him. He's the one that caused her to go away from God, to incline toward the idea of eating from the tree. And
Interesting.
while we're here, because that's an interesting note, they have in the Bible that she ate of the fruit of the tree. But in Hebrew, using self-defining Hebrew, which is the embedded system that this language is built on, the word can't mean fruit. It actually is the word to output, which makes a lot more sense because then they would say he brought the output of the land, or he brought the output of the tree. So once we were saying output, it could have been a nut, because that is also an output of a tree. So little interesting thought there. It's not necessarily a piece of fruit at all. I mean, it definitely isn't an apple or anything. But what it was is when you put it in your mouth and you ate it, something happened chemically, and I don't know, maybe a nanotech download. I don't know what it was, but as soon as you did that, whatever was masking the knowledge suddenly opens up, and then you understand how everything works. And the first thing that happens is you will immediately start to transform to the form of the angels, is the best way of describing it. Like when Jesus
Wow.
was walking up with his disciples and he started giving off light, he was transfiguring. I think that's the
Mhm.
term they use. This is what happened immediately with Adam and Eve. They were not naked. That is the worst translation I've ever heard in my life, because if the word that says they were naked, if you go immediately to the next sentence, it says, then the serpent was the most naked, plural, of all of the animals. But they translated it wise. It's like it's the same word.
Mhm.
So it can't be naked here. Anyway, they were fully clothed, they were fully dressed, they were getting ready to take charge of the garden and start. They were never intended to stay there. They were told that they were to be collecting the seeds and start moving it out over the earth. This was simply a repository of the seed beds. The whole earth was not planted, just this garden area, and they were to take them and to move out. And as we talked about it before, Eve got suckered into eating it. Adam, on the other hand, he knew what he was doing, because he wanted what this guy described, and that was to be like the originators, to have the knowledge of them. And he said, look, he said, you don't have to, I think in the Bible it's, if you eat of this tree, surely the day you eat of this tree, you will die, and then death or something. I don't know, it's really bad. Anyway, what he's saying to them is, you don't have to wait until death in order to transform. That's what the actual Hebrew says. Because normally you or I, we have to wait until we die. There's two words for die in Hebrew. One of them is moth, and the other one is mavoth. Mavoth means rising to continue or raising up to continue. And bad people, mavoth. Those who are following Creator, they moth. And that means to transform. And so when you die, you're not dying, you transform, you transfigure from one to the next phase. And it's very interesting because the term then for angels that sees in the Bible is malach, is what they would normally have as the word angel. And that's the Greek word for messenger. Malach, the only way you can translate that term is a transformed human, a translated human.
Interesting.
So
So
whenever you see
return to our first estate.
you see
That all
that's
fits in
possibly
with.
return. Mhm.
Oh, I was just gonna say that all fits in with my book Skyfall and Sons of God, because I talk
Yeah.
about our pre-existence and.
Now, again, I'm not sure if, because people will ask, do you have proof one way or the other? Is this the first time around, second time around? No. I just can tell you that it simply says that the Malaks are humans originally. And that makes a lot of sense because when the Malak came to visit Abraham, it calls them men, but it also calls them Malak. And you'll find that a lot of times Gabriel, the man, came to speak to me in Daniel.
Right.
But he's also an angel. That's why when you die, if you reach the standard you're supposed to, then you transform to the next level. You
Yes.
leave this body, go to a new one, and then it appears you come and interact with the humans here, specifically on Creator's behalf. Fascinating concept.
Yeah, totally fascinating. I would also I want to make a comment because a lot of people have asked me whether the fruit, that caused them to lose their bright nature, caused them to be kicked out of paradise, whether it had any kind of hallucinogenic properties.
Not according to what we've done. What it was is it's literally the tree that they ate from in the Hebrew is the tree of memories. And it says when they ate of it, it allowed them to remember, and then they got their ability to see. And then once they did, immediately, once they understood the stuff that only the Elohim, and that's what it is, the originators knew, once they understood that, they immediately transcended to that level. And then Creator comes along and says, who told you how to do this? I told you specifically not to do this. And you followed something else. And by eating his command, you now eat permanently. He's in charge of you from now on. I can't do anything about it.
Right. We're under the Nakash's control.
And something I'd like to mention to people, because I get letters from people and they say, why are you restoring the King James Bible is perfect the way it is? And which it's great, except it has lots of mistakes. And I can go with any Bible translation. I'll show people where all the mistakes are, where they conflict. But I want to say to people, if Creator is not in charge of this planet, and according to his own material, he's not, do you honestly believe that the guy in charge of this planet is going to let us have an accurate translation of his material, of Creator's material for us to read? And the answer is no. You can't believe the material you're reading is 100%. He'd be insane to let you have an accurate copy of what Creator wrote. He's in charge of the planet. He doesn't want you siding with Creator.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we have so many of the, because there were thousands of texts during the time of the early formation of the church, during the apostles' times, and for them
It got destroyed.
Yeah, a lot of those texts were destroyed. In fact, I was gonna do a show really soon talking about all hundreds of texts that are mentioned even in even in the canon that we no longer have. And there's also another book in part of the Forgotten Books of Eden, which talks about a number. I mean, there's like 50 texts listed that we no longer have. And so who knows how much of the knowledge has been stripped
Oh, it's
away
just
and
stripped away.
destroyed. Yeah, and
Oh,
kept secret from us
speaking of which,
to keep
because
us in the
you said
dark.
yeah, and they're doing a great job of it. They really are. I mean, the fact that we have to have a program to tell people, multiple programs, to tell people the simple how to observe Creator's calendar. The fact, and people will say, well, come on, that's old, it's not important. And my thing that I say to them is this: if it's not important, how come so many people went to so much trouble over so much time, over so many religions, to eradicate any knowledge of this calendar system?
Right.
It's a lot of work.
Right.
You mentioned Eden. I want to quickly, before I go past that, something happened this week when we were going back through the first chapters. I was having trouble making the sentences work with the word Eden in it. And even more, a gentleman had contacted me from Calgary, which is a city up here. And he said that same word appears in Daniel, where it says that the Antichrist will do this for a time, and half a time.
Uh-huh.
And he said that's the word Eden. And I hadn't got that far. So I looked it up. Sure enough, it's the word Eden. Except they have it as times, and half a time. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous, because the name for Eden isn't time. It isn't. And I know people will try to get metaphysical on that, but no. The SDH doesn't support that. The SDH is the word, Eden is spelled Eon. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do it. And it's the Eon, Daleth, Non. And it means to arc over, which means like to take something from one place to go to another place with it. And then the word non means what follows. So what follows picking something up and moving it from one place to another, and that would be to set down. So the word Eden means to set down in Hebrew, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the really funny part was, I noticed that Eden was used 6 times and the garden was used 13 times. And then I thought, well, wait a second. Why wouldn't you always call it the Garden of Eden? Why would you just call it the garden and not the Garden of Eden every time, or not just Eden every time?
Right.
And so I looked at the sentence structures, and we had some problems leaving it as Eden in the sentence structures. So instead I put to put down, to set down. And I put that in all the sentences. And then I realized when I had done it that Eden is not the name of the garden at all. The place is just called the garden.
Uh-huh.
Eden means to set down. So the sentence would say, and Creator set down the garden, not the Garden of Eden.
Huh, very interesting. Because another one of the things that I write about is talking about how they were exiled from paradise, and then the cherubim is put in place to keep them from returning, and then set down. Because I also speak about how paradise is mentioned as being in the third heaven, and so they're being exiled from the third heaven and set down here to the earth. That would make sense with that whole premise as well.
Interesting idea. Heaven, by the way, is actually the Hebrew word locators, and which is really cool, because everything in Hebrew is a description. And in sham, the word sham means to locate. Now that would also be, in English, we would use that for the word name, because your name is your locator. I say Zen, and you go, what? That's how I locate you.
Right.
So heavens is plural of that, locators. And people don't understand why. And this is one of the Hebrewisms that's lost, which we're trying to put back if people read our stuff. Because the sun is used to locate stuff because you can see. And the moon is to locate your calendation. And the stars are used to locate your geographical position. That's why Creator calls that the locators. So whenever you see the word, like, for example, Creator lives in the heavens, the actual term would be Creator lives among the locators. He lives in space.
Interesting.
So many things that get unveiled. I mean, we took this. I remember it was, I think it was Brad, the co-author of the book. He got a hold of me one day and he said, why don't we go do Daniel? Because it says in the end of days, Daniel will be open. So why don't we take SDH and see what happens? So we went to
Yes,
Daniel
yes.
9:24, and it worked. And I'm like, wow. So if anybody's bored out there, go to our website, click on the newsletter button on the main page, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that you want to read. And it has the Daniel thing in there, but I really extrapolated on there because it matches perfectly with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And I know that's going to ruin a lot of prophecy for a lot of people. It matches with the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and then its redestruction and everything that occurred in 132 AD, including the King Herodian, I think it's Herodian, completely wiping the name of Israel off every map that exists. And it actually said it was going to do that. Now, some people will be angry because all of the prophecies they wanted to say something else are gone. But it does do one thing, and it proves, because we have copies of Daniel that are older than 70 AD, it proves that Daniel is an accurate book, properly, restored.
Hmm.
And because they always said that Daniel was too accurate, therefore it's made up. But by opening what we did, we proved that Daniel is a real book with foretellings of what really was going to occur. So it has benefits, but it has negative aspects for the average person. There, I got off topic on that.
Question, since we're covering this. Have you ever located a Hebrew copy of the Book of Enoch or any of
Oh,
the other,
but
extra
if you
interesting extra biblical texts?
if you ever want to give me a Hanukkah present, whoever's listening, send me a Hebrew copy of the Book of Enoch, because Zen and I would both
Oh,
love to get
yes.
our hands on one of those.
Yes.
Oh,
Love that.
what I would tell people, and this is another thing that's this month on our newsletter, there's a Hebrew copy of Matthew, the Shem Tov. Shem Tov is who wrote it.
Oh, I
And
heard about that.
the biblical scholars will tell you right now that, oh, don't worry, it's back engineered from the Greek. So just ignore it. Really not important at all. Okay. So what we did, a lady got a hold of me and she said, are you guys the ones who did this copy of the Lord's Prayer? And she wrote what it was. And I'm like, oh no, that's not us. That's some crazy Aramaic thing that I don't even know how they got that translation. And so I said, you know what, Diane, I can't do that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab what's called the Lord's Prayer, Jesus telling his disciples how to pray, from the Shem Tov. And let's run it through SDH, self-defining Hebrew, and see, because they have it. If you open the Shem Tov, it's Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. The usual one everybody knows.
Yeah.
So I ran it through SDH, and then with my mouth open, and it ends up saying this. This is Jesus speaking, Yeshua. And in this way, proceed to be constant in what you petition towards him. Father to be following, we shall proceed to revere your name. And so have your kingdom bless your followers to be supporting them, so we can be finishing what we are to manifest amid the locators, the celestials, and amid the earth. And proceed to span bread on an ongoing basis, that it shall continue to arise in our grasp. And reduce to your followers the potentials for becoming involved in continuous entanglement, useless distractions. Establish this, and begin therefore to be bestowing to us those who come from you. Begin towards stringing and sewing together those followers, and begin to proceed toward bringing your followers towards our hand, therefore to congregate those being followers, and to warn those to be following all that fear you. Apply it, which means amen. That's what it says in the Hebrew. Now, all the Bible scholars are,
2 minutes.
ignore it. It's just a back engineered copy. Does that sound like a back engineered copy? Not at all.
Not at all.
Again, trying to hide it from us.
We've got 2 minutes, Chris. I want to give you final commentary, and also, again, give out your website contact info.
TheChronicleProject.org. Go to the site. It's all free. Don't want any of your money. Thank you very much. Maybe someday the website will become so expensive we'll have to. But go get the book, The Destruction of Sabbath, download it. Everything is there. If you don't understand something, get a hold of us. You'll find we're down at the bottom of the front page. If you're there and you don't understand what we're doing, please read the research notes. It will explain everything to you, because this isn't something we just made up. This is something that was there. We just found it was there. And so you can take what's on the site, take a Hebrew word, and find out what it really means. And believe me, and there's also a dictionary of everything that we've restored so far. You can look it up in the dictionary if you want. And if you have any questions, please write us. And I think that's it. And if you've got a lot of money sitting in your hand right now, please send it to this radio station so poor Zen can keep